What's up, Pathways students?
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Tori.
And we are part of the student leadership team here at Pathways. We are excited to have you joining us for online service today.
Before we get started with today's message, we have a few announcements for you guys.
If you want to grow as a person and have a ton of fun, you should get involved in student leadership here at Pathways. You'd even get one of these really cool shirts. Go ahead and send us an email or DM us on social media, and we'd love to have you.
And while we're on that subject, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit us up on all our social medias down below. November 14th.
We will be hosting a turkey bowl from 12 to 2 here at Pathways. We will have flag football, chili, hot dogs, and a bonfire. And get this, we are even going to have 2 $100 prizes.
So if you show up, you get put in a drawing for one. This will be a ton of fun, so invite your friends and come on out.
So we got to thinking, what would a turkey gobble sound like if they were sad, happy, or mad? We're gonna give it a try.
Happy turkey. Mad turkey. Sad turkey.
Gobble, gobble.
Awkward turkey.
Gobble gobble.
This week, we will be diving into week 2 of our current series, Stand Your Ground with Pastor Chad.
So grab those pens and journals and watch this.
All right, guys, welcome back to week 2 of Stand Your Ground. I'm so excited for tonight and so glad that each of you are joining us. Last week, we talked about the Kalam cosmological argument and determined scientifically that the universe is not eternal. Instead, we saw that the existence of a powerful and eternal God who created the universe is the best way to explain the universe that we live in. Now, today, we will be talking about something that I think is super cool. We're talking about the fine-tuning of the universe. You ready? Let's jump in. Now, when we talk about fine-tuning, it's helpful to think of a baking recipe. You need very specific amounts of sugar, flour, vanilla, eggs, and stuff like that in order to bake a cake, right? If you accidentally double the amount of flour in your recipe, you'll get a really bad cake, or maybe not even a cake at all. The universe is the same way. We've discovered that a ton of things about our world and our universe are fine-tuned like a recipe. A little more gravity, we'd be squished. A little closer to the sun, we'd fry. And if we were a little further away from the sun, we'd freeze. So this is what we mean when we say the universe is fine-tuned. In order to help us see that the universe is made very, very specifically for life, we're gonna learn about the teleological argument. All right, this is a deductive argument like the cosmological argument we learned about last week. This just means that both of these arguments have statements that, if proven true, lead to a specific conclusion. Now, remember with the cosmological argument, the root word is cosmos. So last week we observed the cosmos, or the universe, to see what it might show us about God. Now, the root word in the teleological argument is telos, which just means design. So the teleological argument is an argument for the existence of a creator God based on the design we see in the universe. And we're about to see that there is a lot of design. Just like last week, we have 2 statements in our conclusion for our teleological argument. Here's statement 1. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either necessity, chance, or design. And statement 2 says, fine-tuning is not due to necessity or chance. The logical conclusion based on these 2 statements is fine-tuning is due to design. Now, if it is true that fine-tuning is due to design, there must be an intelligent designer. Now, before we get to our statements, we should notice that our argument is assuming that the fine-tuning of the universe is true. We can assume this because everyone agrees about this whether you believe in God or not. Here's a quote from Martin Rees, who is an atheist. He said that fine-tuned numbers make up a recipe for our universe. If any one of them were to be untuned, there would be no stars and no life. Paul Davies, a physicist and professor, says there is now broad agreement among scientists that the universe is fine-tuned for life. So everyone agrees that our universe can sustain life only because our universe and our planet follow the recipe we talked about earlier. Okay? It is finely tuned. The question we need to ask now is, does a finely tuned universe require God, or are there other ways a finely tuned universe could exist? Well, like we said a second ago, many people believe in fine tuning, but not in God. So let's explore other ways people will explain the fine tuning we find in the universe. All right, in order to explain this fine tuning, people who do not believe in God usually argue for chance or necessity, which brings us back to statement 1 of our argument. Remember that? All right, check this out. The fine tuning of the universe is due to either necessity, chance, or design. So in statement 1, we all agree the universe is fine tuned. And we all agree it had to have happened in one of these 3 ways. This brings us to statement 2, which claims that fine-tuning is not due to necessity or chance. So in order to claim that the fine-tuning of the universe is because of design, which is the conclusion of tonight's argument, we have to show that a designer is the most probable reason for the existence of our finely tuned universe. We can accomplish this by learning about the constants in our universe. There are 122 of these fine-tuned constants. All right, let's go through a few, starting with oxygen. Oxygen on Earth has to make up about 21% of the atmosphere. This precise figure allows life on Earth to be possible. If it were 25%, fires would erupt spontaneously. If it were 15%, human beings would suffocate. Crazy, huh? Let's look at another constant in our atmosphere. Everyone knows we have an atmosphere that we can all see through. Well, if the atmosphere were less see-through, not enough energy from the sun would reach Earth and we'd all freeze. If it were more see-through, we'd be fried, you guys. Let's look at another one. If the universe had expanded at a rate 1/1000th more slowly than it did, expansion would have stopped and the universe would have collapsed on itself before any stars formed. That's a big explosion, you guys. If it had expanded faster than it did, no galaxies would have formed at all, and everything would have just flown off into space at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Check this one out. If Jupiter had a different orbit around the sun, the Earth would have been demolished a long time ago by massive objects flying through space. There are literally Earth-sized craters in Jupiter created by objects that would have hit Earth if a massive planet such as Jupiter hadn't been there to take the blow instead. Now check this out, because I'm gonna give you some numbers that will literally blow your mind. Scientist Ross calculated the probability of the 122 constants that exist on our Earth existing on even one of these trillion planets. That probability is 10 to the 138. That's double the number of atoms in our universe, you guys. And here's the crazy thing. For just 2 of these constants to happen by chance would be like if you stood on the moon. All right, check this out. Put on a blindfold and you had a dart in your hand. At the end of this dart is a point the size of an atom, you guys. Now, all you have to do while blindfolded is hit a target on Earth, also the size of an atom, 67 billion times in a row without missing. That would be the odds of just 2 of these constants existing in a universe. We have 122 of them in ours. To demonstrate this point, please enjoy watching how Maddie can't even hit a bullseye on a dartboard from 5 feet away when blindfolded. Not even close! So going back to statement 1 from our argument, we know that this fine-tuning in the universe either came about by necessity, chance, or design. What these incredible constants show is that it is far from necessary for a universe to sustain life. In fact, it is insanely unlikely that a universe could sustain life, and given how finely tuned a universe has to be to sustain life, we should not expect any life to exist at all. A life-sustaining universe is anything but necessary, you guys. Physicist Paul Davies agrees when he writes that there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the universe has to have the set of constants that it does. Second, these constants show that it is actually pretty crazy to claim that the fine-tuning we have just seen came about by chance. In fact, there's almost no chance of this being true. As a last desperate effort, some scientists have suggested the multiverse theory. The idea of the multiverse suggests that there is some kind of universe generator that just continually creates universes. People who support this idea claim that eventually a universe as finely tuned as ours would just pop out if enough universes were generated. But you guys, not only do we have 0 evidence for the existence of a multiverse or a multiverse generator, but this idea also just backs up the problem, because this universe generator would also have to be finely tuned in order to function as people imagine it would. Even prominent atheist scientists such as Richard Dawkins agree that this is not a good explanation for the fine-tuning of our universe. All right, check this out. Long story short, it's almost impossible for a planet to support life-sustaining conditions unless there was a designer. So here's what I'm suggesting tonight, guys. It actually takes way more faith to believe that our universe came about by necessity or chance than it does to believe that it came about by design. In other words, atheists need to have way more faith than we do as Christians because they believe that something virtually impossible actually happened, all right? So what we have seen tonight is that statements 1 and 2 of the teleological argument are, in fact, true. This not only agrees with what we saw last week, but it builds on it in some pretty cool ways. Last week, we discovered that there is an eternal and powerful being outside of space, time, and matter who created the universe. That's pretty cool, right? What we have learned tonight is that this being is also deeply personal and seems to have created our universe specifically with the survival of human life in mind. This personal God knows what we need and created a world that we could thrive in. The fine-tuning in the universe proves this beyond the reasonable doubt. Now, I know you guys are smart, and now that we know that God has fine-tuned the universe, let's look at how he has fine-tuned me and you and what this means for something called naturalistic evolution. All right? It's a worldview that rejects the existence of God, believes only in the natural, and believes in evolution. Charles Darwin, the popular founder of this worldview, said this: "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by many slight changes over time, my theory would absolutely break down. We have since discovered a number of very complex things on Earth, and it seems unlikely that these things could have evolved through naturalistic evolution over time, based on what we know right now." Check this out. Michael Behe writes, "No scientist can give a detailed account of how vision or blood clotting or any complex biochemical process might have developed in a Darwinian fashion. This raises some serious questions for naturalistic evolution. Take, for instance, the idea of irreducible complexity. This is so much fun! This just means that there are a minimum number of parts required for something to work. An example of this could be a mousetrap. Ah! Guys, please don't do this at home. A mousetrap has a combination of parts like a base, a spring, and a latch that are all necessary to catch a mouse, like it caught my hand. If just one piece is missing, the mousetrap would not function. This means that a mousetrap is irreducibly complex, since no part can be removed from it with the mousetrap still working. Within our own bodies, there are little propellers on cells that are a great example of this. All right, check this out. These little propellers are an example of biological machinery within our bodies that have these many parts, all of which are necessary for it to work. 40 parts to be exact. Naturalistic evolution has a hard time explaining irreducible complexity because all of these parts cannot evolve over time if all the parts are needed for that thing to function at all. See, the theory of evolution is based on change in living things over time. New parts and functions are added to a creature as time goes on. But think about the mousetrap. Without a spring, it's not a mousetrap. All the parts together are a mousetrap. It is impossible for it to function as a whole without all the parts being present. It is impossible for it to evolve little by little over time because without all of its parts, it can't work at all. Now, I need to clarify something really important here, so listen close. The theory of evolution does not require atheism. In fact, many of the most brilliant Christian scientists who love God actually believe that much of the theory of evolution is accurate and see a lot of evidence for it, okay? However, they believe that God is the one guiding this evolution. This leads to belief in a God-directed evolution rather than naturalistic evolution. It is the naturalistic evolution without the existence of God that is becoming more and more unlikely as we learn more from science. But biblically, Christians can hold to God-guided evolution just as honestly as someone may hold to God creating humans from nothing. So what we've shown is that Darwin's naturalistic evolution theory has some problems and challenges that scientists to this day have not been able to figure out. The universe and the creatures in it are finely tuned, and it's almost impossible for all of it to exist without design. Which leads us to our conclusion. If we see design in the universe, there must have been a designer. Think about this. If you came across a house in the middle of the woods with a welcome mat, beds, and a chicken roasting on an open fire, you wouldn't conclude that some random hurricane naturally built its own house. That would just be ridiculous, you guys. What you would conclude is that someone had plans to build something. All of this evidence is so convincing that it even shakes up atheistic scientists, you guys. Check out this quote from astronomer Fred Hoyle, whose atheism got shaken up after he saw the incredible fine-tuning in the universe. He says, "A common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that an intelligent being has monkeyed with physics, as well as with chemistry and biology." Check this out. Stephen Hawking, one of the most famous atheists, said this: "The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life." You guys, if Stephen Hawking can look at the universe and believe it appears to be designed, I would suggest to you today that the universe has a designer. And we know who that is. I would deeply encourage you today, allow these things to shape your understanding of the world that we live in. It has been designed intentionally by God just for us. We love you guys and hope the facts that you've gotten today revealed that to you. Just as it has to many atheist scientists that there is a designer of the universe. Guys, see you next week.
A guy came up to me the other night, right? And he was like, "Who's your favorite artist?" And like most people do when they ask a question, he didn't really care about my answer and proceeded to tell me what he thought the true answer was. And he continued about his struggle to recognize who he said was the greatest of all time. He said, is it Shakespeare? Is it Frost, Picasso, Michelangelo? Is it the Beatles, Rembrandt, Michael Jackson, Beethoven? And he went on and on and on about who he thought was the greatest, not recognizing even his infrastructure to answer that question was misled and outdated. And so finally, I kindly smiled and said, "Okay, sir, you asked me who is the greatest of all time. Now you tried to share yours, so let me share mine, because there's no debate about who is the greatest, because all those other artists you mentioned, yeah, the greatest made them. And see, this artist, he's a beast, a lion, the name above names. You don't even realize it, but you encounter his art every day. And he deserves all of the acclaim. He deserves all of the fame, because all other artists pass away, but he remains. Oh, by the way, his name is God, Yahweh, creator, your maker. He's infinitely creative, sir. There is no one greater. And I can tell it looks like you're starting to get mad at me, but don't be jealous just because your favorite artist might bend words and my favorite artist bends galaxies. See, in the palm of his hand, he holds all the sand, the author of life, when he whispered, "Let us make man." See, what if I told you that you are God's poetry? You were created because someone else was creative. See, long ago, he picked up his eternal paintbrush, dipped it in his glory, placed us in his story, and said, "They will live for me." And I know it sounds outlandish, but we're not the product of random chances. And in fact, we're not even the vine. We're actually the branches. In the same way, we're not the artist. We're actually the canvas. Because in an instant, God started to make art shaped you uniquely and beautiful, individual from the start. And he touched the canvas of flesh and said, "This one is better than the rest. I'll give him so much of my image, so even when they're hot off the press, you can still see the steam of my breath." And so he crafted and he made every arm and leg, ligaments, tendons, muscles, blood vessels, veins, arteries. He said, "They're gonna have a part of me." And about that time, the guy butted back in and said, "That sounds good and all, but I'm wretched and filthy. God won't use me, will he?" And I said, see, that's what's awesome about God. No matter what we've done, he can still use us. Even though other artists, once they have broken equipment, they start to make excuses, God instead doesn't refuse us, and neither does he accuse us. He redeems us in Jesus, promises never to lose us. So stop saying that you're dirt. Stop saying you're scum of the earth. You ought to be careful about how you talk about someone else's work. Because if we've trusted in Jesus, we can stop saying we're filthy. All that is anyways is just pride clothed in false humility. If we only believed that we're truthfully created in his likeness, then we'd stop saying we're wretched, filthy, shameful, guilty, but instead knowing if we've trusted Jesus, we're righteous. Don't you see we're drawn to repentance because of his kindness? So how dare you call yourself worthless when he says you're priceless? But see, the best part is, since God is ultimately for God, he'll get glory out of you, whether you like it or not, because even temple ruins point to an architect, even if the temple is shot. And all I'm saying is that he's behind it all. So why do we insist on giving him no credit at all? He's the one that gave Van Gogh the imagination that changed the face of painting. Tell me, who else is responsible for Mozart being able to compose at age 5 without formal training? See, he made the fingers that Beethoven used to make art on the keys. For Pete's sake, he made Stevie Wonder, one of the best musicians of our time, and he couldn't even see. And that's why in the same way that our lives are borrowed time, this poem is borrowed lines, because the most ridiculous statement we could ever say is that this poem is mine, because we're not self-sustaining. No, we're not self-creating. Technically, nothing we do is original. We're just imitating, and that's not a diss. All I'm trying to say is this: even our own creativity is nothing more than an outflow of His. And so I'll end with this. You know that quote about giving credit where credit is due? Well, if that's true, it's about time we give God His rightful credit too, because He's a God in the business of making old things new. And here's the truth: He's not through with making a masterpiece of you.
What a cool message. What did you think?
I loved it. I'm still thinking about how science has shown that there is a design in the universe, and how this is really a powerful argument for the existence of a personal and powerful God who, out of His love for us, created a world perfectly fit for people to live and thrive.
Yeah, that's what stood out to me too. I can't wait to dive into this more with our small group leaders. Go ahead and click those Zoom links, and we'll see you next week at 6:30. And invite a friend to watch with you, because we will be jumping into week 3 of Stand Your Ground, where we will be exploring the historical life of Jesus.
See you, homie.
See you, homie.
No, don't touch me.